Hi everyone, how are you guys doing today? Um, Today we'll be learning about functions and DOM manipulation. So, are you guys excited? And did you guys go through yesterday's lesson? Were you able to understand the different JavaScript constructs that we learned? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so yeah, good evening to all of you, those who are there in the chat, and let's wait a little bit for others to join, and we'll just start the session in a bit. Today's topic is going to be we'll be learning quite a lot of things today with regards to JavaScript. We'll be learning how we can create a function and what are functions, how do functions work, and then we will be moving on to DOM, and which is the document object model, which allows us to modify and play around with the elements programmatically. So with the help of JavaScript we can manipulate the DOM, right? So we'll be learning everything with regards to DOM today. So let's start with the class, right? So what we will do is let me open VS Code, okay, and let me also resize this. All right, so I have the code from yesterday, which was regarding number comparison. You can see I have added this inside the script tag. A lot of you were asking me yesterday, can we execute this code within, can we write the same code within VS Code? Yes, we can do that. Yesterday, just for the sake of convenience, I was writing all the things within the console tab. So let's open this page, right, in our browser. Okay, and if I open the developer tools, we have two numbers over here, right? Num1 and num2. The first number's value is 5, the second number's value is 10. Then over here we have the condition where we are checking if num2 is greater than num1, then we would be printing this text. If num2 is less than, then we would be printing num2 is less than num1, and if both the numbers were equal, we were printing both the numbers are equal, right? So as you can see, this script was executed, this piece of JavaScript code was executed, and the result has been logged in the console of the browser. Okay, and we can see 10 is greater than 5, right, which is being shown in the it's coming in the first part of the if condition. Now suppose I want to um, have this piece of code run against a different set of numbers. Okay, so what I will have to do is I will have to basically copy this entire function, right, and I will have to reassign the values of num1 as say for example I want to set num1 as 10 and num2 as 5, right, and I want this entire piece of code to be re-executed. So what I have to do is I have to rewrite this entire piece of code once again. Okay, so now if we see we are getting the correct output, 5 is less than 10, but what you will notice is every time we want to um, do a number comparison with a different set of numbers, we are rewriting the same set of statements again and again. So is there a better way available to us to perform this operation? Do you guys have any idea how we can do that? You can let me know in the comments. So yeah, you guys are right, we can make use of function. So let's look at how we can create a function. But before that, what we will do is, so far we have been writing all of our code inside the script tag, right? So just like how we can move CSS into an external file, we can also move our JavaScript code into an external file. So I will do one thing. I will create a new file over here. We will call it as main.js. Okay. And all of this code which we have written so far, I'll just cut it and paste it here. In order to link this file, right, or to make it available within the browser, we will be using the script tag, but we'll make use of the source attribute and give the path of the file that we want to link. Okay, so for adding CSS, we used to make use of the link tag. For adding JavaScript, we make use of the script tag, and we just provide the path of the file that we want to link. Okay, so we have moved our file. We have created a separate file for JavaScript, and it has been linked. And even if we refresh the page, right? Give me a sec. Even if we refresh the page, you can still see the same outputs. That means our code is being executed. Now what we want to do is we want to get rid of all of this code repetition, right? So what we will do is we will move, let me get rid of these, okay? Or rather, let me comment it out so that you guys can see the difference between the two. All right, so in order to create a function, we make use of the function keyword. All right, and to give a function a name, we give it a name. So in this case, we want to compare numbers, right? And this function accepts two parameters. So within the parentheses, let's give it let's provide some variable names over here as parameters. So first number, and then for the second number, we will accept it as follows, right? So to accept input, we can pass them over here as parameters. Then this entire piece of code, we can copy and paste it here. All right, so this is the logic for the number comparison, and we will just rename the variables over here. First number, okay, and we'll just call this as give me a sec. So I'm renaming variables. You can do so using the function and the F2 key, and we'll just call this as second number. All right, okay, and the rest of the logic is same as before. Okay, and then in order to invoke a function or call a function, we need to so actually, so far what we have done is we have just defined a function. So this is known as the function definition, right? In order to execute the statements which are there within this function, we need to call this function, or we need to invoke this function. So in order to call the function, we make use of the name that we have given to the function, right? So the name of a function is compare number, and then in order to call it, we need to close, and we need to basically provide the parentheses. Okay, now since this function accepts parameters, okay, you can also have functions which do not accept anything. Okay, but since our function accepts inputs or parameters, we need to call it with the values, right? So suppose we want to check whether 5 is greater than 10, right? Okay, So we are passing 5 and 10. 5 will be assigned to first number, okay, this variable, and the value 10 will be assigned to second number, and then our code will be executed. Okay, so let me save this, and once then let's see our browser. Let me refresh this. So you can see, okay, hang on a sec. Our logic was based on the second number, right? So I'll just quickly modify this code. All right. Okay, now we're just checking if first number is less than the second number. That means the first number is, hang on a sec. Let me swap these variables because we were earlier comparing the first number with the second number with the first one. So I need to appropriately update the conditions. Second number is less than the first number. All right. So now this is how we are invoking or calling our function, right? Okay, and since we need to in order to reuse this function, right, if I want to execute the same piece of code against a different set of values, all I need to do is call this function once again, and this time I can pass 10 and 5, right? So now, okay, wait. Give me a sec. I think I am messing up the code quite a lot today. So we just need to switch the conditions. This was correct. The second number is, so we'll say first number is greater. Then if first number is less than the second number, we will have the correct result, right? So when we are comparing 10 with 5, we are getting the result as 10 is greater than 5. So the point is that earlier, every time we wanted to basically compare the values, right, against the different set of numbers, we would have to rewrite the same piece of code again and again. What function allows us to do is extract that piece of code into a function, and then we can keep on reusing that code by calling the function. Okay, suppose I pass 10 and 10, right? So now it's giving me the output as both the numbers are equal, and this is another statement. Okay, so this is how you can see that we have very easily reduced our code complexity, and our code has become much more readable. Okay, so function allows us to reuse existing code, and we can invoke a function like this, and a function can accept any number of parameters, or we can have a function, for example, print. Okay, and it will just print something, print this text printed in the console. All right, and if we call this function print, right, now this function doesn't accept any parameters, right? So we can also have functions which do not accept any parameters, and you can see that this text has been printed in the console. Okay, all right, then we have something known as a function expression. Okay, so yesterday we learned about variables, right? So what we can do is we can have a variable. So for example, we have a function, all right, add numbers, which accepts first number and a second number. All right, and it returns the sum of first number plus second number. Okay, so as you can see, a function can also return a value, okay, and it returns a value using the return statement. The function that we had written over here, it was not returning anything, it was just doing some calculation and logging the result in the console. When we want to explicitly return something from a function, we make use of the return keyword. All right, and when I call this function like this, I give it two values. Suppose I want to add 2 and 3, okay, and whatever is the result, I want to store it in a variable. So const result equals add number, okay, and let's this, since we are not, we are not logging this to the console, that is why it is not printed over here. So let's do that, and let's log the result over here. So you can see the result has been logged over here, and it is showing the sum of two numbers, okay. The next thing is, suppose I want to it is also possible for me to store a function inside a variable, okay, so that is known as function expression, okay. So suppose I have a variable const add, that is equal to function add number, and the rest of the thing is same, right? But what we are doing is we are storing the reference of this function in a variable. So basically this variable's value is equal to this function, okay, and in order to call this function, all we need to do is say add, okay, and then we will pass the two numbers that we want to add, for example 5 and 7, and we want to store the result in a variable like this, and let's log the result in the console, okay. So you can see that the result has been logged to the console, and this variable is holding a reference to the function, and in order to call this function we still need to use the parentheses and pass the parameters like this. So this syntax where we are storing the reference of a function in a variable, this is known as the function expression syntax, okay. Now there is another thing we can do over here. We have something known as anonymous functions, okay. So what this allows us to do is we can have a function which does not have a name. So let's do that. So let's create a function const subtract, okay, or rather subtract, and we have function subtract numbers, okay. It also accepts two parameters, first number and second number, all right, and then we will return first number minus second number, all right. But instead of providing a name like this, we can omit the name, okay. Now this function doesn't have a name, and this is particularly useful when we are trying to use the function expression syntax. We can have a function which does not have a name, because as it is we are not using this function name, right? So when we will be invoking this function or calling this function, all right, we'll just make use of the variable which holds the reference to this function, and we will invoke it like this. So if we want to subtract 3 from 5, it should give us a negative result, so we'll just log this in the console like this, okay. Let's save this, and we're getting the result as -2. All right, so this is known as anonymous functions. So basically it means the function doesn't have a name, okay. So any questions with regards to this? You can let me know in the chats. Okay, so is it clear to you guys what a function is? It So basically, earlier we were writing these statements multiple times. Instead, we consolidated it into a function, okay, which allows us to encapsulate the functionality. A function can accept any number of parameters, and you can specify the parameters like this, and the multiple parameters can be separated using a comma. Okay, so you can have the third parameter here like this. Okay, if your function does not accept any parameters, you leave out this space empty. Okay, and you invoke a function like this. When you want to store the reference of a function, you can do so using a variable, and it is possible to call the function by using the variable which holds the reference of the function. Okay, and then we can also have anonymous functions. Those are basically functions which do not have a name. All right, uh, just like we looked at objects yesterday. So for example, we have an object person, all right, and it has these properties like first name, for example, which is John. Okay, and then we have another property, last name, which is Doe. Okay, similarly, we can also have functions inside an object. Okay, so suppose I want to do, for example, I want to say let's create a function called print, and this holds the reference to a function, and it will just say console.log. This is being called, or this function is a property of an object. Okay, and in order to call a function from an object, we make use of the dot operator, which allows us to access these properties, right? And since this is a function, we need to make use of the parentheses to invoke it. All right, and if I save this, you can see that we can see this text in the console. This function is a property of an object. All right, and if you do not know what const is, you can refer to yesterday's lesson where we had covered all the data types. Okay, so even within objects we can have a function, and you can create a key which holds the value as the function. All right, so this is where it is pretty useful to have anonymous functions. This is one use case where you can use anonymous functions. All right, okay, now I wanted to cover a few things with regards to the coding conventions in JavaScript, right? Because we have been writing quite a lot of code in JavaScript. So if you have noticed, we use something known as Camel Case. All right, what this means is that if you're combining multiple words, so for example, we have this function, right, compare number, rather it should have been called compare numbers. Okay, so the first word is always in lowercase, the first letter of the word is always in lowercase, and whatever is the next word, its first letter is in the uppercase. This is known as camel casing, and this is the naming convention that we follow in JavaScript. All right, so wherever we have single words, they're all in lowercase. And suppose I change this to subtract two numbers. All right. So you can see that the other two words have their first letter in capital. So this way of doing things is known as camel case. Okay. So we name functions like this. We name variables also following this camel case convention. Okay. And the opening bracket starts on the same line, and basically you do not move it to the next line. This is another way um, of how we define the blocks or how we write the blocks within JavaScript. And another thing that I would like to state is that do not use variable names like I, J, K, A, B, C, D, because it's very difficult to read your code in that case. Okay, over here, if you see, we have given meaningful names to all of our variables, right? So this function accepts two parameters, which are numbers like first number, second number. So try to use meaningful names so that if you're reading the code once again, it makes sense to you, or if someone else is reading the code, it should make sense to them as well. All right. So just these two tips I wanted to share with you guys, that use meaningful names and follow the camel case convention for naming things. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we will be looking at today is this was the basics with regards to the function in JavaScript, right? Functions in JavaScript. The next thing that we will be understanding today is the document object model, or the DOM. All right. So let's understand what it is. What we will do over here is, let me just comment out this script. Okay. And let's do one thing. Let's create 3 paragraphs over here. Okay. Let's call this as let's give it the content as this is the first paragraph. All right. This is the second para, and within this we have a span. Okay, I misspelled it. Give me a sec. Okay, and we'll say second para, and this is inside the second para. Okay, so we can see this text. This is the first paragraph, this is the second paragraph, and to distinguish the span, let's give it a class. Let's call it blue, which will give it a blue color. For the sake of convenience, let me just add a style tag over here, and we'll define a class over here, blue, and let's give it a color of royal blue. All right. So you can see this text has the color royal blue. This is part of the span. All right. So what we have seen so far is that we have some HTML elements which are being shown inside the browser. But how does the browser, display the HTML document which we are seeing in this browser? So for its convenience, what it tries to do, it tries to convert this HTML document into a format which is understood by it. Okay, and that format is known as the document object model, or the DOM. Okay, so the DOM is a tree-like structure. Okay, so if we consider this example, right, and we want to see its DOM tree, so this is the DOM tree for this document, right? Let me just space this slightly. So it creates a tree-like structure for all of the tags which are available, and it does so with the help of a special function. The browser makes use of a special function to construct the DOM tree, which is known as the parser. So what the parser does is that it goes through our HTML document. When it comes across an element, it creates something known as the DOM node. All right, and this DOM node contains the information associated with this element, and this DOM node is basically an object. Okay, so this is an object which represents all the properties and styling information associated with an element, and it creates these this tree one by one. So as it is going through all the tags one by one, so first it came across the HTML tag, right? Rather than the HTML tag, yeah, so it came across the HTML tag and it created a DOM node out of it. Okay, then the next thing that it came across is the head tag. So this tree structure contains it represents all the parents as well as the children which are available. It organizes the tree in that hierarchy. So our HTML element is the root element, right? Within that we have the head. Okay, the head has another child which is the title, and we can also add the style tag as a node within the head, right? The other child which the HTML tag has is the body, and it has two children, right? The first paragraph and the second paragraph. And this paragraph has so in our case the second paragraph has this span, right? So what we can do is, instead of having this here, okay, let me get rid of this. So our second paragraph has this span tag as the child, right? So this is how it creates a DOM tree. Okay, and let's look at this in the browser as well. So if you go to the Elements tab, right, and let me take this up slightly, we can see the document object model right here. Okay, so this is our root tag, which is the HTML tag. Then it has these children's, right, head and body. This is coming from an extension that I have installed, so you can ignore this. Okay, then within the head we have all the meta tags and the title and the style tag, and within the body we have these two paragraphs, and this paragraph has this span, right? Okay, now these are all the DOM nodes, and as I had mentioned to you guys, these DOM nodes are objects which are created by the browser, right? And these objects have properties. Okay, so if we open the give me a sec. If we open the properties tab over here, all right, so if we look at the this paragraph, for example, okay, so it has some properties associated with it. All right, this is the DOM node, and this is the all these, and this is basically an object now, right, which has all the properties associated with this HTML element. Okay, so you can see that this paragraph has the inner HTML and the inner text set as this is the first paragraph, which is basically the content. Okay, now for example, let's do one thing. Let's give this paragraph an ID. Okay, let's call it as first para, for example. Let me save this, and if we filter over here the ID attribute, you can see we find the ID as a property to this object, and it has this value which we had set. Okay, so all the attributes and all the data which is associated with an HTML element is represented as an object when a DOM node is created. Okay, so this entirely represents the document object model, and each element is represented as a DOM node. Okay, so is this part clear to you guys? What is a DOM tree and what is a DOM node? You can let me know in the comments. Okay, you guys are able to understand it, so that is good. And similarly, like how it goes through all of these tags and creates a DOM node which has all the properties associated with that HTML element. Similar to that, it also creates the CSS Object Model, or CSSOM, which has all the styling information associated with the element. Okay, and for example, if we look at this span, right, and if we examine the styles tab, it has all the styling information associated with it, which is visible over here. So this is also available as an object which we can modify programmatically. Okay, so what the browser allows us to do is that it allows us to access the DOM using an API. Okay, and if you guys are wondering what is an API, I was just reading through the comments. Okay, so everything is clear. So I was mentioning that the browser allows us to access these DOM nodes using an API. Okay, API stands for Application Programming Interface. So basically what it means is APIs are functions which are external. Okay, these are functions which we have not written ourselves. So far, like if you remember, this is a function that we have written. These APIs are functions which are provided by an external entity or are external to the program which we have written ourselves. And we use the term interface because an interface allows us, or rather it provides us a mechanism to call these functions. Okay, so we don't know anything about the implementation of these functions, but using an interface, we know that using an interface we can call these functions. Okay, so the interface provided by the browser for us to access the DOM nodes is through the document object. So we have something known as the document, okay, which is provided by the browser. It is an object. All right. So if you are noticing, when I'm hovering over this, it is selecting the entire page. Okay, it is a representation of the entire document, and within this we have the head tag and the body tag, right? So suppose I want to access the head tag, I can say document dot head, like this. So it is giving me access to the head DOM node, right? And suppose let's give this a, so this head this document has a title, right? Functions. Okay, let me just change this to DOM, for example. All right, and suppose I want to view the title of this document programmatically. So what I can say is document dot head, right, dot title, let's do, give me a sec. Did I not save this? Okay. So we will say document dot head dot title. Hang on a sec. This should have given us the value for the title. Document dot head dot title dot. Okay, hang on a sec. All right, so actually, since this, the title is set to this window, right? So we have another object known as the window, which is an interface to this entire window. And within this window, we are accessing the document and its title property. Now it's giving us the value of the element, okay, like this. Okay, similarly, what I want to do is I want to view the styling information of this element, right? So what I can do is I have this paragraph tag, and within this we have this span, right? So what we can do is we can say document dot get element by class name, okay, and the class name is blue, for example. Okay, so it is giving us this span element, right? It is returning us the element which has the class name blue, so it's just this span. So if I'm selecting this, it is highlighting that element, as you can see above. Okay, and the other thing is so this has given me access to the class name. As you can see, this is a collection, okay, and it is available at index 0. So in order to access this element, I will specify the index like this. And suppose I want to access its class name, so it is available as a property class name. When I execute this, you can see it is returning me the value blue, which is the name of the class which we have set to this element. All right, so as you can see, the document object allows us to interact with the DOM nodes. Let's take a look at a few more examples to understand this in a better way. Okay, so what we have done so far is that we have been creating all of these paragraphs on our own. Let's look at a couple of methods which allow us to create the different HTML elements programmatically. All right, so what we will do is let me create another file. So DOM API examples. Okay, and here what we will do is we in order to run this file, we will link it over here. So let me add a script tag. Let's provide the source as DOM API examples.js. Okay, so this JavaScript file has been linked over here, and let me move it over here. The next thing that we will do is, we know that we can access the different objects which are available to us using the document object, right? So in order to create an element, what we will do is, suppose I want to create another paragraph over here. So in order to create an element, we make use of the create element function, which is available on the document object. So what we will do is document dot create element. Okay, you give the name of the element that you want to create. So I want to create a paragraph, right? So I will specify the value p as in for the p tag, the name of the tag, right? Then I want to store the reference of the created element over here. So let me call this as para. Okay, so we have created an element. Now what I want is the element which I have created, I want to show some text inside this paragraph. So I will say para dot text content equals this is created using DOM API. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is, as you can see, all of these elements, right, they are present inside this body tag. So what I want to do is the element which I have created right now, I want to append it inside the body tag. So what I will say is document.body.append child, right? Because this is the parent tag and I want to append a child to it. So I will say append child, and the element which I want to append, which is this para, I will pass it over here like this. Okay, let me save this, and you can see the moment I save this, this element has been created programmatically and it has been appended to the body. Let's inspect this in the console. So you can see that it added this paragraph, right, to the body tag. Okay, and since we created this text content has been added inside here. Okay, so is this clear to you guys how we can create an element programmatically and set some content inside it using JavaScript? Okay, and suppose what I want to do is within this paragraph, okay, so let's look at another example of how we can create an element. This time what I want to do is I want to create a span tag. Okay, so once again, in order to create an element, I have access to the document, which is an object. So how do I access the properties of an object? I make use of the dot operator. Then I want to create an element, which is a function, right? So I will say create element like this. Okay, and I want to create a span tag. So I specify the name of the tag which I want to create. Then I can also set attributes, how we used to set attributes over here, right? Like this, like class or ID, these are all attributes, correct? So I can also set attributes. So I can say span dot ID equals to, span ID, for example, and I want to set a class to it as well. So span dot class name equals, I want to also show this span in blue color, so I will give it the class as blue, right? So instead of using the class property directly, since class is a reserved word in JavaScript, we have to make use of class name, and we give the value as blue. Okay, now I want to show this span. Okay, so this has created a DOM node. Okay, so this is a DOM node, right? And as we know, DOM nodes have properties of elements available to them. So we are basically setting those properties like this. Okay, And then what I want to do is to this para which we had created earlier, we will append this as a child within this para. So I will say para dot append child, and the element which I want to append is this span. So let's save this. Okay, if you notice, this span has been created right now, but since it doesn't have any text inside it, we do not see anything. So let's add some text to it. So we'll say span dot text content equals, this is span created using document dot create element. All right, so you can see this text is visible over here now, like this. Okay, so if we inspect this, it has this ID, span ID, it has this class blue, right? And this is how we can programmatically create an element and set the different attributes which are available to an element. Okay, now I had also told you guys that the styling information is also available, and that is known as the CSS or the CSS Object Model. So for example, let me comment this out. Okay, and suppose I want to give the span some styling information. So the styling information is available inside the style property. Suppose I want to change the background color for this span, and I want to set the background color to yellow, for example. Okay, so I will say span.style.background color as yellow. Suppose I wanted to change the color, I would just say style.color. So these are basically all the values which were available as CSS properties when we used to define a CSS rule, right? So it is the same name, it is just following the Camel Case convention. Okay, so background color, I will set it to yellow. So let's save this. So you can see that this span now has the background color as yellow. If I add this, uncomment this, you can see that it has the text color as blue and the background color as yellow. All right, so is this correct to you? I mean, sorry, is this understood by you guys? How we create an element, how we set attributes, rather how we set content inside it, how we can manipulate the attributes. So this process of programmatically creating elements, modifying its content, and changing its style, changing the attributes, this is collectively known as DOM manipulation. Okay, all right, so far we have seen how to create an element, right? uh, so you can also set attributes like this. There is another way of setting attributes. So for example, I want to give this paragraph an ID. Okay, so I can make use of para.id. Okay, but we have already seen how we can set the ID attribute using the property like this, but we can also set an attribute using the set attribute function. Okay, so we'll say para.set attribute. So I want to set the ID, for example. So I give the name of the attribute that I want to set, and the second parameter is the value that I want to set to this attribute. Okay, so suppose I want to set the attribute as JS para, for example, which just indicates that this paragraph was created programmatically. Let's save this. And now if we inspect this paragraph, it has this ID and a attribute, and its value has been set as JS para. Okay, suppose I want to log the value of an attribute in the console. All right, so what I will do is I'll say console.log para dot get attribute and the name of the attribute whose value I want to retrieve. So I want to get the ID attribute. So I'll say console.log para.get attribute and the name of the attribute which I want to get. So if we see the console right now, it is logging the value JS para. Okay. All right. So there are huge or a large number of methods available which allow us to do different things. Right now we set the class name like this. We can also set the suppose what we will do is we want to add a class to this. Okay, so para dot class list, this is another way, dot add. Okay, this is an array or a collection, so it has a different way of adding items to it. So we can make use of the add function. So class list dot add and the name of the class that I want to add over here. Suppose I want to give it a class name as a say 1, for example. Okay, I want to add a class 1 to this paragraph element. Okay, so let's save this, and if we inspect this element right now, you can see that it has this class and the class name has been set to 1. Suppose I want to add another class to it, for example second class, like this. If I save this, you can see we have the first class as well as the second class available to us. All right, so this is another way of how you can add a class to an element programmatically. All right, we can also instead of using and suppose now I want to remove this class. Okay, so there's a method known as para.classlist.remove and the name of the class that I want to remove, so second class, for example. Let's save this. So now we can see that it only has the first class available because we have removed this class. Okay, so either you can add a class like this using the class list property, and you can call different functions on it, the add function to add a class and the remove function to remove a class. Or you can set a class like this. So suppose I want to add multiple classes to this span, for example blue, red, right? So I can make use of the class name also like this. And if I save this and if we see the span, it has the class values available as blue and red. Okay, so these are the different ways of how you can set a different bunch of properties. So far we have seen how we can create elements. Okay, let's look at another property. So suppose within this span, right, I want to show some text which is in bold. So I can make use of the, instead of text content, now for example I want to add another tag within this. All right, another way of doing this is that we can make use of something known as the inner HTML. All right, so let's give me a sec. Yeah, so if we use the text content property and we want to, for example, show this text dom dot create element in italics, as you know we have the em tag which allows us to italicize the text. If I save this, right, since we're using the text content property, even though we have added a HTML element inside this, right, it is still showing that as a text content. But there is another property available to us known as inner HTML. What this allows us to do is we can define the content of this element as HTML. So whatever is text will be shown as text, and if there is a element or a HTML tag which is present inside this string, it will convert that into an HTML element. So let's save this, and now you can see that this particular text has been italicized, right? And if we inspect this over here, we can see that this emphasis or emphasize element has been added, right? And it has this dom.create element over here. Okay, so this is what the actually I forgot to close this, right? Okay, so that is why you're getting two em tags. So you can see that it has added this HTML element directly. So whenever you want to define HTML tags within a string, you can make use of the inner HTML property. If I switch this back to just text content, it will treat everything as text content. So once again, we can see this em being treated as a text. Okay, so let's change it back to inner HTML. All right, so this allows us to basically represent the string as, or rather it informs the API that whatever HTML text is there, you need to convert it into an HTML element. Okay, so we use the inner HTML property for that purpose. Is that clear to you guys? You can let me know in the comments. Okay. All right. Let's do one thing. Let's take a quick break over here of 5 minutes, and then we'll learn a couple of more methods related to this. Okay. So there was a question that why is the text content property? Sometimes you just want to show text inside your tag, right? You do not want to have nested elements. So in that case, you can make use of the text content property. But if you want to programmatically generate HTML tags from a string, you can make use of the inner HTML. Or what you can do is you can create a separate element like this, and then you can append it to the parent element like this. Okay, so it depends from use case to use case. Whenever you want to create an element using the create element API provided by the document object, we can make use of the append child functionality to append that created element. It just depends, what we are trying to achieve. So different problems have different solutions. So I'm just showing you the different ways of going about it. When we come across a particular use case, or when you come across a particular use case while practicing all of these methods, it will make sense to you. You need to use which sort of way to create an element. Okay. Yeah, so we can add a child element using inner HTML. That is exactly what we did, right? We have this span tag, and this span tag has this as the child element, right? We can have another span tag over here as well. So if I say span, okay, and let me close this span tag, and this will have the text another span over here. And if I save this, you can read it over here, right? Another span. So we can create child elements using the inner HTML property. And yeah, you can also append a you can also have a paragraph inside a span, but semantically it does not make sense, right? Because span is an inline element and a paragraph is a block level element. So is it possible? Yes, it is possible, but should you do it? No. So are you guys able to follow along so far? What is an API? What is a DOM node? How do you access methods? Okay. Earlier we had created our own methods. This time we are using an external method. The implementation is hidden to us, but we are, calling this method and we are able to get some functionality done. Okay. All right. Um, so let's resume the session now. And what we will do is that we look at a couple of more examples. So if you remember from yesterday, we learned how to create an array, right? So suppose I have a list of hobbies, okay, which is coding, then swimming, and then we have jogging, okay. So these are some hobbies, and I want to show these as an unordered list over here. All right. So any idea how we can do that? How we can create an unordered list programmatically and add these items to it? Okay. So there is no response. So Uh, all right. So what we will do is, first of all, we need to create the UL tag, right? So we will say document dot create element UL, okay, for unordered list. So this is giving us access to the list element, the unordered list. Then what we want to do is we want to loop through all the hobbies. So we will say let hobby of hobbies, right? We are making use of the for of loop. Then what we want to do is we have the list and we want to set the inner HTML, and within this we want to define list items, right? So to add a single list item, we will open it and close it like this. Then what we want to do is we want to display the hobby, right, as the content of this li. So we will make use of string concatenation and add this hobby, right? So we will use the plus operator to concatenate strings, okay. And then so what we're doing over here is the inner HTML is initially empty. So we'll make use of the shorthand operator, which is plus equals. So whatever was the previous value to it, we will append li, the hobby, and we will close the li. Okay. And suppose we want to show this in blue color, so we have this class available to us, right, which has the value blue. Okay, so we have defined a class like this. So this syntax of using inner HTML, it allows us to how we were writing tags over here. If you want to write a tag in a similar fashion but create it programmatically, so you can do so using this way of using the inner HTML property like this. Okay, then the next thing is that I have this list available and I need to append it to the body tag, right? So I will say document dot body dot append child the list. Okay, let's save this, and we can see that it has added this list over here. Since we have written this before we are appending the paragraph, that is why you can see this paragraph below this list. If I move this line above this list, or rather let me just move it here, so you can see the paragraph is available first and then we have the list. So the order in which we are appending children, that is the order in which it will get added to the DOM tree. Okay, so we have this UL, then we have all of these list items with the class blue, and here we were basically adding all of the hobbies. So we were looping through all of the hobbies in this array, and we created LIs programmatically like this. So is this clear to you guys? So this is the syntax of the for of loop, right? This was covered yesterday. If you guys do not remember it, you can check out the end part of yesterday's lesson where we covered the for of loop. Okay. All right. So far we have looked at how to create elements. Now let's look at how we can retrieve elements or get the elements programmatically. So for that, we have different APIs available to us. So suppose I want to get this p tag, which has the ID, which has this ID as first para. Okay, so what I will do is I will say document dot get element by ID. The value of the ID is first para, so let me provide the value over here. And what we want to do is we want to see its text content, for example. So first let's just get the paragraph. Okay, so I'll just log this in the console. Okay, like this. If we look at the console, we have the paragraph available over here. And if I want to access any of its properties, for example the text content, so now I'm just accessing it like this. If I save this, you can now see that it's logging the content of the first paragraph. So what it does is basically it goes through this DOM tree, okay, and it tries to find the element which has this ID. Once it finds that element, it returns the DOM node. And once we have access to the DOM node, we can access any of the properties within that DOM node. So we are trying to access the text content. Okay, so you can see that the text content has been printed. So this is one way you can access elements using ID. Okay, now suppose I want to access all the elements which have the class blue. All right, so what I can do is I can say document dot get elements by class name, and the name of the class is blue, for example. So let's save this. So you can see that it is returning me a collection. You can think of it as an array, right? And it has all the elements which have the class blue applied to them. Okay, so all of these li have the class blue, and this pan has the blue class available, right? Okay, so you can also access all the different elements using the class name. Suppose I want to make use of, if you remember from the previous lessons, we were making use of something known as CSS selectors, right? So to get an element using the ID, we would make use of the hash sign. To get an element using the class name, we would, say dot and the name of the class. And to access elements using the tag name, we would just specify the name of the tag. Okay, so suppose I want to access all of the so suppose I want to get a element which is a paragraph. Okay, so what I will say is document dot get the method for this is query selector. Okay, and since I want to access a paragraph, I can make use of the paragraph element. I specify the value as p over here. So this function has the name as selector, right? So it allows us to use selectors. Okay, so let's log this in the console and see what it is returning us. So it is giving us this paragraph, this first para. Okay, so the thing with this function is that whatever is the first element that matches this selector, it returns only that. But suppose I want all the elements in this document which are paragraphs, so in that case I will make use of query selector all function. Okay, so this will return me all the elements which are paragraphs. But before we execute this function, let's just look at one more thing with regards to the query selector. So if you remember, when we got the elements by class name, it was a collection. When we got the element by ID, it was a specific element, right? And even the query selector returns us an individual element, right? Like this. And it has all of the properties available. If we use query selector all, right, it will give us a list. Okay, all the elements which are paragraphs are available to us. So this is a paragraph. You can see the highlighted portion on the visible part of the browser. This is a paragraph, and then this is a paragraph, right? So it is returning us all of the elements which are paragraphs. So you understand the difference between query selector and query selector all. Query selector will just give us the first element across which matches the the CSS selector. So it is going through the DOM tree. So this is the first paragraph that it will come across. It will always traverse the DOM from the body, right? Or like from the root element itself, right? So this is the first paragraph that it will come across. Okay. Then suppose I want to access the paragraph which has the ID first para, right? So I can make use of the hash or the pound symbol, which is the ID selector and the name of the ID. Okay, so first para. So then it will return the first para, as you can see over here. Let me just save this. You can see it is giving us the first para. Okay, this is coming from line number 37, as you can see over here. All right. Suppose I want to access this paragraph which has the class 1. So in order to access a class, to find an element using the class name, we use the dot and the name of the class, which is 1. Okay, so if we save this, you can see that it is returning us this paragraph which has the class 1. Okay, so inside the query selector and the query selector all method, you can use different selectors, and using those selectors you can target specific elements. Okay, so is this clear to you guys? So we have different ways of accessing the elements, right? It is not clear to like some of you. So get element by id, you can just specify the id value. This will not work with class names. This one only supports class names, right? You can only get elements by specifying the class name. Okay, over here we have the flexibility. If we want to get an element by the id, we can make use of the id selector. If we want to get an element by the class name, we can make use of the class name selector, right? And if we want to get an element by its tag name, you can specify the name of the tag over here and it will return that tag. And if we want all of the tags or all of the elements which have a particular class, we can use query selector all. Query selector just returns the first element that matches this rule, and all returns all of the elements which match this rule. Okay, so that is the basic difference. All right. Okay, so these are the basic ways by which you can retrieve the different elements. And earlier I had shown you how to create elements. Okay, so it's not just that we can access the elements which we have created programmatically, we can access any elements which are available on the DOM tree. Okay, suppose I want to access this ul, right? So I can just say ul. Okay, and if I see in the console, it is giving me access to this element. Okay, so this is how you can target different elements. Now we will be building something cool and adding to our portfolio. So let's stop this. And what we will do is, let me quickly open the portfolio. Let me get rid of this. All right. So this is our code for the portfolio, right? If you guys remember, let me just run this in the browser. So this is where we had left off. We had styled the background, added an image, and added our social media links, and styled this and added a table over here basically. Okay, and I mean there are more DOM methods. Somebody's asking in the comments, document.get elements by get element by tag name. So basically it returns the element with the matching tag name. But you see the flexibility that query selector offers you, right? Those are specific methods. Get element by id works with just id, with class name which just works with class name, tag name just works with the name of the tag. Okay, query selector allows you to use css selector and target element. Okay, all right. So this is the this is where we had left off the last time. Okay, what we want to do is we want to create a typewriter effect. Okay, so in case you're wondering what is a typewriter effect, it means that we'll be showing some text over here. Okay, and each character will be typed one by one. So suppose I want to show the text, I am a software engineer. Okay, So what it will do is we will be printing each of the individual characters one by one. Okay, and this piece of text which we have available over here, we will replace this. Okay, clear all of the text content one by one, and then we will show a different text. Okay, so for example, I am a mentor. This is the next text that I want to show. Then I will clear this, and then we will show another text. So the typewriter effect is where you show a phrase being typed. Okay, so the phrase will be typed over here automatically. Each character will be displayed one by one. Then it will be cleared, and then we will be showing a next word, and then we will clear that word, and then we'll be showing another word. So we'll be, showing the typewriter effect using different words. All right. So let's do one thing. So this was the div where we have our intro, right? So just before our social media links, let's add another paragraph, and let's add a text over here. I am, and here we will have the dynamic text. So let's create a span over here. Let's close that span, and let's give it an ID as dynamic text. Okay, for example, just for reference, let me add just text over here. So I am a mentor, for example. So you can see this text is available to us. Okay, and let's do one more thing, that let's create a class over here, dynamic text color. Let's give it a color as royal blue. Okay, and let's assign that class over here, class name, and let's call it, what did we name this? Dynamic text color. All right, let's add this class over here, and let me collapse this so that more of the content is visible to you guys. Okay, so you can see that this text, what we want to do is we want to show the typewriter effect for this piece of text. Okay, all right. So let me get rid of this for now, and what we will do is, let me just collapse this code. Let's add a script tag, and let's create a new file over here, main.js. Okay, let's link it over here. So we'll say src equals main.js. So we have linked a JavaScript file to our portfolio. Okay, so we want to access, let me just inspect this over here. So we want to access this pan tag, right? So what we will do is we will say let's store it in a variable. So let's call it as dynamic content, and to get it we will make use of the document.get element by id API, and we will provide the ID over here. Okay, hang on a sec, I did something, yeah, by mistake. So the ID for this tag is dynamic text, right? And let's just check if we're getting the correct element. So we'll log it in the console, dynamic content, like this. If we examine the content, let me clear this. Okay, let's do a refresh. Yeah, so if I examine the content, the logs, I can see that I'm getting access to this span. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is let's define some phrases. So const phrases Let's store the phrases in an array. These are the phrases that we want to uh, show using the typewriter effect. So the first phrase is software engineer, for example. You can add your own phrases. Software engineer dot dot dot. Then mentor. Okay. And for example, dot dot dot. And human being. Okay. So we have these phrases available to us. All right. Okay. Then let's create a function called print letters. Okay. It will accept a phrase and it will print the letters of the phrase one by one. All right. So what we will do is let's create a variable to keep track of the number of letters that we have covered so far. So let's call it as let letter index equals 0. Okay. So what we will do is initially let's just call this let's just call print letters with the first phrase. So in order to access the first element in an array, we give it the index as 0, right? And let's just do one thing. So normally if we were to access the letters of a phrase, we would loop through the items, right? So we'll have let index equals 0, index is less than phrase dot length, right? And index plus plus, and we want to print the characters one by one. So we'll just say console.log phrase dot char at index, right? So let's save this, and you can see that software engineer has been printed. All of the characters have been printed one by one in the console like this. Okay. But what we want to do is we want to show this effect we want this thing to happen slowly, right? Okay. Slowly we want to add a one character at a time to this dynamic content. First of all, let's just check if the phrase that we are adding which is being passed over here, that we are able to add that. So in order to add the phrase, we will say dynamic content dot text content equals the phrase. Okay, let's save this, and you can see that it is showing the first phrase over here inside this span. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to go through the characters of this phrase one by one and print one character at a time. Okay, so in order to do that, we will be making use of a special function which is available to us known as set timeout. All right, now what this set timeout function does is that you pass a function reference here, okay, as the first parameter, and the next parameter you specify a delay in milliseconds. All right, so for example, let's specify a delay of 100 milliseconds. So what this function will do is it will call this function after 100 milliseconds have passed. Suppose I want to call a function after 1 second, so I will pass the value as 1000. 1000 milliseconds equals 1 second. Okay, so it will call the function that we are passing over here after 1 second. This is what set timeout allows us to do. So let's make use of this function. Okay, So what this function will do is, here we were manually looping through all of the things, right? What we want to do is, we'll make use of this index to keep track of all the letters which are there in a phrase, and we will call set timeout. We will use set timeout, and we will call our print letters function and increment the letter index one by one and append that value to the text content. Okay, so we have this phrase available, right? So we want to access a particular character, so we will just say char at the letter index. Okay, let me just comment this out for now, and this will make sense, like what we're trying to do. So initially the letter index is 0, and if we call this function, it will just print the first character. Suppose I wanted to print the next character, right? So what I will do is I will say letter index +1, for example. Okay, and I want to append this, the existing character, right? Append it to the existing character. What we will say is, we will say plus equals over here. So you can see that when it executed this statement, it printed the first character. Then when it executed this statement, it printed the next character which was there in the phrase, right? So with the help of set timeout, what we will do is we will just call this print letter function repeatedly and increment the index one by one. And that function will be called with a certain delay, right? So it will give us that effect that each character is being typed one by one. So let's do that now. So we have the set timeout function. To it, we will give reference to the print letters function. So we'll create an anonymous function over here, and within this anonymous function we will just call print letters. Okay, and we will just pass it the phrase that we want to, whose letters we want to print. Okay, once a letter has been what do you say, printed, we will add the index by 1 to move on to the next letter. So we'll say index equals to letter index +1. Okay, like this. Or you can make use of the shorthand operator and you can say letter index plus equals to 1. Both are the same thing. And then we will call the set timeout function. And another thing that we want to check is, we want to print till the end of this, till we reach the last character in this string, right? So for that, we will just check if letter index is less than the phrase, less than that phrase's length. Okay, so we will keep on printing all the characters one by one until we reach the end of this string. Okay, and so let's wrap this piece of code inside this if condition, and let's give a delay over here of 300 milliseconds. Let's save this. So you can see that it is slowly typing all of the characters one by one. Okay, so this is how we are able to show the typewriter effect. Okay, we have printed just the first phrase, and it is basically going through all the characters, then it is checking, and then it is incrementing the letter index by 1. Then we are making use of the set timeout function, which will once again call the print letters function after a delay of 300 milliseconds. Okay, so it will print one character, increment the index, call the print letters function after a delay of 300 milliseconds, and then it will print the next character. And this process will go on unless and until we are at the end of this string. All right, now once we are at the end of this string, we want to get rid of this text. Okay, we want to clear the characters of this phrase. So in order to do that, what we will do is we will create another function known as clear letters. Okay, and what we want to do is when the letter index is equals, okay, equal to the length of the phrase, right? That means we have come to the end of the string, right? So in that case, the letter index will be equal to the length of the phrase. That is the time when we need to clear the letters which have been typed. All right. Okay. So what we will do is over here, we will call our clear letters function. And instead of, now we have written an if condition over here, right? So we will change this to an else if. Okay, so once we are at the end of the string, once again this set timeout will call the print letters function, and here we will see that the letter index is equal to the length of the phrase. That means we need to clear all the letters one by one. So what we will do over here is we will check if index, if letter index is greater than -1. That means we have not cleared all of the letters which are there in a string, right? So the index starts with 0, correct? So this indicates that we will be traversing in this direction, right? So we will be reducing the index as we clear each letter one by one. So what we want to check is till we have not cleared all of the letters of a phrase, we will keep on clearing one letter at a time, and this function we will call repeatedly using the timeout as well. Okay, so what we will do is let's create a variable, let's call it as updated phrase. All right, and let's set this to an empty string. Then what we want to do is we want to loop through all the letters. Okay, so let index equals 0, index is less than the phrases. uh, let's do one thing. We'll be going through all of these phrases, right? So to keep track of all the phrases, let's create a variable known as phrase index, which just points to the different phrases at a given point of time. And here let's call this with phrase index. So the initial value of phrase index is 0. Okay, and what we want to do is whatever is the current phrase index. Okay, so this will give us access to whatever is the current phrase. So for example, it is this one. So phrases at the phrase index, that phrase's length we will access. So index should be less than the length of the phrase that we are trying to clear, and we will say index plus plus. All right, so what we are trying to do over here is we will, every time we will append all the characters one by one to the updated phrase except the last character. Okay, so we will just say plus equals, actually this should not be phrases index. Hang on a sec. So we need to actually go up till the letter index over here. Okay, so we will go up till the letter index, and we will append all the characters except that particular letter index. So we will say phrases at phrase index dot char at this particular index. Okay, all right, and using this, basically we are basically getting the phrase up till its second last character. Then what we will do is we will set this as the text content. Okay, updated phrase is equal to the text content, and what we want to do is then we want to reduce the letter index by 1. Okay, so we will say letter index minus equals 1. Then we want to clear the next letter right after a delay of certain amount, so we'll make use of set timeout, and we will call clear letters, and we will call clear letters with a delay of say 100 milliseconds. So let's try this out over here. Let's save this. So it is printing I am a software engineer, for example. Now once it is at the end of the string, okay, which is this part, then it calls the clear letters function. Then it comes over here. Initially the letter index is 8, so it will start with 0, and basically we'll get the updated phrase. It will append that updated phrase. We will reduce the letter index by 1. So next time what we have available with us is just this much, right? Then it will reduce the letter index has been reduced by 1. Once again the loop will start from 0 and go up till the second last character. It will append all the characters one by one to this phrase, and we will append that to the dynamic content. Then once again we're reducing the letter index, right? And basically then we have this piece of text available to us. So one by one it is just removing all the letters, and we are updating the DOM dynamic content text content over here with the updated phrase. Okay, let me just log this console.log updated phrase. Okay, let me log this for you guys so that you understand what is going on, and let me increase this speed as well. Let's make it 200. Okay, so it has printed all of the characters. Then we are calling clear letter, and you can see that initially it is software engineer with 3 dots, then just 2 dots, then 1 dot. Then one by one the last character is being removed till we have reached the end, till we have cleared all of the characters. Okay, so once we have cleared all of the characters, what we need to do is we need to move on to the next phrase. All right, so what we will do over here is we will check if letter index equals -1. That means we have cleared all of the characters. In that case we will say phrase index equals phrase index plus 1. All right, to move on to the next phrase in the list of phrases. And then we'll make use of the modulo operator, and we will check whether it is completely divisible by the length of phrases which is available to us. Okay, so what we're trying to do is over here is, so for example the number of phrases available with us is 3, right? So the phrase index is initially 0. So if you do 0 modulo 3, right, you're getting the result as 0. If you do 1, right, which is the second phrase, right, So if you do 1 modulo 3, you're getting the result as 1. So once we are at the last phrase, right, after that the phrase index will be incremented by 1, right? So when we do, so this is 0th index, this is index 1 and index 2. Once this phrase has been covered, it will come over here and once again increment the phrase index by 1, right? So now the value of phrase index will be 3, and if we do 3 mod 3, it will give the result as 0. So once again, using the modulo operator, we will be back at the 0th index. So the indexes will only go between 0, 1, 2, and then once again back to 0. So this is just to loop through all of the phrases one by one. Okay, so this will, just loop the increment the index value in such a manner that it only goes up till 2, and then after 2 it comes back to 0 once again. Okay, and then what we want to do is we also want to see reset the letter index to 0, right? Because we'll be moving on to the next phrase and we want to start with the first character, right? So we will set the letter index back to 0 and we will call the print letters function once again, and this time we will pass it the phrases and we will use this phrase index to move on to the next phrase. All right, and since we have used an if statement over here, let's replace this with an else if. Okay, and let's do one thing. Let's define variables over here for the typing speed. So let's set the typing speed to 100 and the erasing speed to say 75, or rather let's just set this to 150, and let's use the typing speed variable over here, and let's use the erasing speed variable over here, and let's save this. So you can see it is printing the entire text, erasing it, and what is it saying? Main.js line 27, phrase index plus 1 more phrases dot length. What is wrong over here? Give me a sec. Let's go back to the console. It is saying that assignment to constant variable. Okay, so this was a const, right? And we want to modify it. All right, so that is why it is giving us that exception. So we need to change this to a let because we are updating its value constantly. Okay, so let's save this now, and you can see that it is typing the text, clearing it, then moving on to the next phrase, and then clearing it. All right, so this is continuously happening. So we have successfully implemented the typewriter effect. So you can add more phrases over here. You can add any phrase which is relevant to you. And yeah, so we used all of the things that we had learned yesterday and the things which we learned today. We have combined all of those things and we have added this functionality to our portfolio. Okay, so I hope it is clear to you guys. Right now this is being run infinitely, right? So later on we'll see how to just trigger this on certain conditions and stop it, but as we are learning more and more things, we'll figure that out and we'll update the code over here. But for right now, let's just leave it like this. Okay, so I hope it's clear to you guys. If there are any questions, we can take it up in the Mahasabha voice channel. And that is it for this lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. We learned quite a lot of things today. We learned about functions, DOM manipulation, what are DOM nodes, how to create them, how to update them, and we also learned about the set timeout function, and we added another new feature to our portfolio. Okay, so um, let's end the session here now, and I will see you guys in the Discord.